Kansas has a new receiver, a transfer from Nebraska in Jaidyn Doss, and he picked the Jayhawks over the Wildcats of K-State. It's a big deal for KU. We talk about it on today's episode of the show.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on? Derek Johnson here at D Johnson Radio on Twitter. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the Everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the show. Hit that subscribe button. Trying to get up to 4K for the start of football season coming up week 0. We're a little over a month away, and KU football is going to have a new weapon for Jalon Daniels to throw to. Jaidyn Doss, who's a transfer receiver from Nebraska. And on top of being a Big Ten player that transfers into KU, also picked KU over K-State in the end. So that always makes the recruitment a little more interesting for KU. We'll take a look at his game, the receiver room, and also some MLB drafted Jayhawks. Just got into the MLB draft and some history being made by Dan Fitzgerald and company that we'll talk about with KU baseball. Let's get right into it with Jaidyn Doss. So the news of the day, Jaidyn Doss, he is a former highly ranked, I guess you would say, local recruit. Normally, I think of local recruit as a Kansas kid, but Missouri is close enough. Originally, he goes from high school to Nebraska and was with the Huskers the last 2 seasons, entered the transfer portal late. You might be wondering how that's possible. Well, there's a new rule that was created by the House versus the NCAA settlement, and Doss went into the portal as a designated student athlete, which I don't totally understand it, but it's like it's one of the players grandfathered into the new 105-player roster limits. You're allowed to do that, I guess. The settlement also allows for a new portal window, which Doss obviously entered into. So he's able to make it work that way, and because of that, he will be immediately eligible. This isn't a situation where it's like, oh, he's entering too late, so what does that mean for his eligibility? Don't have to worry about that now. And he'll officially be a Kansas Jayhawk, and coming to Lawrence, it sounds like the word is that he's going to be, this was from Jayhawk Slant, I guess now Rivals on 3, whatever you want to call which one of those 3, but they sent out a tweet and it mentioned that he plans to enroll next week. And John Kirby always does great work there. So enrolling next week, even better, right? And I think the quote that was given there, it feels like a fresh start and I'm hungry. He was originally a class of 2023 recruit. He was, like I said, local-ish from the state of Missouri, went to Raymore Peculiar High School, and he was an 89 graded 3-star out of high school, according to 24/7 Sports. And how that scale works is a 90 is a 4-star. So he was about as close to a 4-star recruit as you could possibly get. He was a very highly sought-after high school recruit, and he was top 650 nationally in the 24/7 Sports composite. We've had a lot of conversations in commitment, episodes where we've talked about, the meaning of when KU has gotten top 800, top 500, top 1,000 recruits. And Doss is somebody who's a former version of one of those. He's going to be a redshirt sophomore in 2025. So that means he'll have 3 years left of eligibility, 3 years left to play for KU and Lance Leipold. And he stands at 6 foot, 195 pounds, so he's not like the biggest receiver in the world, but he's not the smallest either. He joined Nebraska after his time at Raymore Peculiar High School, in which he had over 2,000 receiving yards over 3 seasons. The stats kind of went down from sophomore to junior to senior year. I don't know if he was dealing with injury stuff over the course of his high school career as it went on, or if there was other stuff, like was he playing other positions that prevented some of the receiving numbers to go down. I don't entirely know what went on there, but still for a high school varsity career, over 2,000 career receiving yards, and the highlights look pretty darn good. He had some really good return touchdowns. Looks to be kind of at the very least, I think something you'll be able to fall back on here is if Doss never cracks the rotation as a receiver, which I think he will, but if he never does, you might have a return specialist here, and a pretty good one. Honestly, would not shock me. It's going to be tough for him to come in. If he's joining next week and you're talking about the season at week 0 being August 23rd. So if he's joining next week, he'll only be around the program, around the team for a month. it's going to be hard to probably get immediate playing time if you're him. Like maybe he can crack the 2 deep a few weeks into the season. Maybe he can, like, remember Kobe Baines. Kobe Baines will now be a starter on the offensive line for KU this year. He joined Kansas from Louisville as a transfer. I want to say it might have even been like a week into fall camp the first year that he joined the team. He ended up cracking, I think, the 2 deep by the end of that season. Maybe it was like the middle of the year, around a bye week, end of the season, something like that. And then he ended up being kind of like a part-time starter the next year and really a full-time starter last year. So maybe that's the path for Doss. Like maybe he cracks the 2 deep at some point in the next couple of seasons, or I'm sorry, in the next, the first couple of weeks of the season. Then by year 2, he's maybe a starter, or at the very least on the 2 deep. And then by year 3, his final season, he is for sure a starter and maybe, one of the top receivers on the team, right? That would be kind of the slow play progression. But who knows? Maybe he is that good of an athlete and that good of a player that, he can pick things up right away. And he does end up on the field really early on. I do think the one area that I look at and say, I do actually think he get it on the field early enough, as soon as, honestly, the very first game is as a return man, because it's a little more complicated when you're running offensive plays, when you're the receiver. Where do I block? What route do I run? What's the route tree here? What are the audibles? There's a lot more that goes into that than just the kick returns. So it's like, okay, catch the ball, follow your blocks. This is where they're blocking, and score a touchdown. Like a lot of the kick return stuff is the return man. Same with punt return, is a little more instinctual, it feels like, than a fully drawn up play. Like, yes, you are drawing up where guys are trying to block and maybe the path where you're trying to go, but for the most part, it is kind of an instinctual thing. And he has those instincts. You see it on the high school film of him being a returner. So it would not shock me if he's on the field very early in his time at Kansas from a return standpoint. But really good yard after catch receiver. You see that from his high school film. Because of that, I would imagine he'll be somebody, a candidate to be used on like reverses and screen passes, which, Jeff Grimes would have loved that. I don't think they'll use it as much as Jeff Grimes did, but they still will use it. And I think that yak comes in the form of, like, he has really good agility, really good quickness, really good kind of phone booth quickness, that you would call it, ability to, like, break a tackle in a phone booth, so to speak. And he actually has good, like, ability to bounce off of tackles, like arm tackles, some good strength and balance in his body to kind of stay up. I also was impressed when watching some of his receiving stuff in terms of his ability to come back to the football. That's something where sometimes receivers might just wait for the football to come to them. And that could be on like an underthrown deep ball, or that could be on like a hitch route or something. They're just waiting and the DB jumps in front of them and picks it off. He did a good job, like, running back to the football. I was impressed with some of that stuff. I would say he has the potential to be a really good route runner because he has really good quickness. Seems like he has good footwork. I would imagine he could be a really good route runner. I would say he's a fast player. I wouldn't say he's going to be the fastest on the team or one of the few fastest on the team, but he's got good speed. I would say he's more quick than he is fast. Very good agility, very good quickness is how I describe that. But honestly, he reminds me a little bit of like a different version of Trevor Wilson. Like, and there's never going to be a 100% comp because you're not that exact player. I think Trevor Wilson had a little bit more straight line speed and acceleration. I think Doss looks like he has more quickness and short area quickness than Wilson had. But I think there's some similarities there in terms of being like a 5'11", 6 foot type receiver who can really beat you on a deep ball, but might be playing from the slot, might be a return man a little bit here or there. But also keep in mind, me saying that, Doss is I guess you would say, a higher potential version of that. Like when you look at Doss's recruiting profile, he's a near 4-star recruit. Trevor Wilson was not that. He went to Buffalo out of high school. So if you're talking about a version of Trevor Wilson with hopefully, hopefully better hands on punt return, I guess you would say, and higher potential, like that could be a very good outcome for KU in all of this. And you look at his time in Nebraska, there's not like a ton to speak to. In 2023, he had 2 catches for 20 yards with a long of 16. That was in 79 snaps. Ends up redshirting that year because he only plays the max of 4 games. Then in 2024, he actually got moved to defensive back. And so there will be a bit of rawness getting him back to receiver, I would imagine, but receiver is kind of his natural position. And that's, I'm sure, why he's transferring. He wants to get back to playing receiver. So I think the idea here is Kansas is going to use him again as a receiver where he was his first year there. I should also mention this. This was from Alan True at 24/7 Sports. This was the scouting report that he wrote up on Doss back when he was in high school. It said, Looks almost like a running back on the hoof. Productive player since his freshman year and has played in state title games and big games. Play a variety of roles from outside receiver to slot and play in the backfield and take handoffs. And I find that interesting too, because you look at Emmanuel Henderson, who I think could be KU's receiver number 1 this year. Very fast player, was a former high school running back. And so it feels like maybe KU is starting to shift to, are they looking for more of these receivers who are kind of running backs in receivers' bodies or receivers in running backs' body? I don't know, whatever way that would work. But it also says his experience as a return man, shows good short area quickness, which allows him to separate as a route runner. Above average breakaway speed and good elusiveness, can take short passes and go the distance from anywhere on the field. Will likely continue to be used in a very varied manner in college. Good, not elite measurables, but has all the tools to be a productive college player. One that an offense will have a lot of options how to deploy. It also mentions he ran a 11.36 100-meter dash as a junior, long jumped to over 21 feet. So good athlete, good speedy receiver. How does he fit in? What does the KU receiver room look like right now? That next. Today's episode of Locked on Jayhawks is brought to you by Game Time. You'll be able to get tickets to the first KU football game, Week 0 against Fresno State, August 23rd on Game Time. We've all been there too. Logging on early, waiting forever for concerts, sports, comedy, whatever you're looking to go to, tickets that go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live events should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert, sports, comedy, any event ticket faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endless scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Game Time's zone deals pick the best seats in the section for you. Take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked on Jayhawks. Jaidyn Doss officially is the newest Jayhawk, and he is the newest Jayhawk receiver that'll be thrown to by Jalon Daniels and company. So he becomes the 11th receiver on scholarship, I guess, in the receiver room. I guess Bryce Cohoon, I don't think he's on scholarship, but walk on, which is still grandfathered in at this point in time. But I think you look at the starters right now, like Emmanuel Henderson, who you brought in from Alabama. That's the guy I'm expecting to be receiver 1. I think you look at the combination of Bryson Canty and Levi Wentz, like one of those two is probably a starter. The other one's probably still rotating and playing. And then the slot receiver is either Doug Emelian, if you go with the experience and the guy who knows the system, or Cam Pickett, if you're going with the guy who, okay, he's a newcomer, but maybe has a little higher potential. I think Emelian maybe more known for being like the route runner. I think maybe Cam Pickett more known for being like the yard after catch guy and somebody you can throw quick plays to and he can make something happen. So I think both of them will play, but then you have Keaton Kubeka, who really impressed the coaching staff as a true freshman, had to deal with some injury stuff, I think, last year. So it'll be interesting where he figures out in the 2 deep. Then you have that group of 4 incoming true freshmen. Jaden Nickens, very talented. Bryson Hayes, very speedy. Local kid, Tate Nagy, the local kid recruit, son of Matt Nagy, who is transitioning from quarterback to be kind of the crafty slot receiver. And then Jackson Cook, who is kind of your speedy, big, outside X type of receiver from Georgia, I believe. So that's the room that he's walking into. And there isn't a lot of certainty there. KU lost a majority of its production from a season ago. So it's not impossible that Doss could come in and be somebody who is on the 2 deep, be somebody who is playing games right away for KU. Now, it'll be interesting to see how KU uses him, as being somebody who's really good yard after catch. And again, he's got fine size at 6 feet, but he's not the biggest guy in the world. Do they use him as a slot receiver? If that is the case, he immediately goes in competition with Emelian and Pickett, which, it feels like those guys would have the upper hand right now. But you look at it long term, Emelian's a redshirt senior, Pickett's a redshirt junior, and then you would have incoming here with Doss, who is going to be a redshirt sophomore. So he could represent somebody as, maybe he gets on the field a little bit, rotates in here or there, you use him in the return game, and then when Emelian graduates, he's on the 2 deep for sure with Pickett at that point in 2026 at the slot spot. If he is used on the outside, and there's a real chance he's used all over, right? Like he can be a flexible receiver that you use at multiple spots, and that can be really impactful and helpful for an offense if you have guys that are pliable to play different spots, which I think he is. When he's being used as an outside receiver, I mean, again, you look at it with Canty and Levi Wentz, even if those guys wind up ahead of him as transfers coming in, because they've maybe had a little bit more time, although I guess that's not the case with Canty, who is having to join late. But you look at those, both those are redshirt seniors. So, even if he gets fit into the position that those guys are, okay, well, maybe in 2025, again, it's more rotational. Maybe you're getting some return snaps. And then come 2026, both those guys graduate. If KU feels good about how he's performing in practice and behind the scenes, then they won't feel as needy to be having to go out into the transfer portal and bring in a starting receiver. They can just be like, no, we feel like Doss is going to fill that spot, right? And then he could be a starter there as soon as, again, 2026. And then you look at that other spot, Emmanuel Henderson. Again, he's a senior, so that's another departing receiver spot. So the way I look at it, I kind of view it as like, I don't know how much we're going to see any of the freshmen get on the field right away. Like, I'm sure KU wants to redshirt most of, if not all of them. And if that's the case, then you're looking at really Henderson, Canty, Emilian, Wentz, Kubeka, Pickett, and then the addition of Doss. That would be 7 receivers that you're kind of rotating for 3 spots at all given times. Now, one thing that does kind of matter into all this, I don't know that KU is going to have as, like, you look back to a couple of years ago when you had Mason Fairchild and Jared Casey, and then you had Trevor Cardell as the third. Like, KU felt really good about their 3 tight ends. KU might end up feeling good about where their tight ends are, but there is a little bit more uncertainty there. And if there's more uncertainty there, does KU steer into saying, okay, we're going to play less formations with 2 tight ends. We're going to play more formations with 1 tight end and use an extra receiver a little bit more often. And then there's more snaps at receiver to kind of go around for those guys. But I kind of look at that, the competition. Like, to me, Henderson probably ends up as your number 1. And then it's really a competition from there for those other spots. And Doss is somebody I would toss into that competition. Again, it makes it a little bit difficult that he's joining late, but so is Bryson Canty. And Doss clearly is somebody who's very talented that I think will be a rotational receiver this year. And like I said earlier, would not shock me if he ends up being your starting kick returner and punt returner. But as we went over a lot of those new additions that you brought in via the transfer portal, again, Henderson, Canty, Wentz are all seniors, and Emilian, who's coming back as a senior. So even if Doss ends up being more of a rotational receiver, even if he ends up being your wide receiver 5, 6, or 7 this year, that could end up being receiver 3, receiver 2, receiver 4 on next year's team, or with a season of improvement, he could be the go-to option on the 2026 team for whoever's thrown to him, whether that's Isaiah Marshall, Cole Ballard, or David McComb, or I don't know, transfer quarterback, whatever ends up happening there, right? So I think Doss, the this year role is more rotational, but I think the future is very bright, and I think that's part of the reason why KU is bringing him in, thinking, okay, we got 3 years left with this kid to be like, hey, if he can contribute this year and he does come in and he looks that talented right away and he ends up being, earning a starting spot on this year team, awesome. That's found money. But if not, we feel good about developing this kid who's got a lot of talent and turning him into something that could be really helpful for us in 2026 when we're going to be losing Jalon Daniels, when we're going to be losing a lot more of these receivers to where we're going to need a lot of replacing production. And we'd like to line it up to where we have guys who have been in the system, to where we have guys who know what's expected of them and that we know what to expect of them in terms of possible production and we know what to think of them, that we don't have to go out in the transfer portal like we did this past offseason. And if you have to go into the transfer portal in a given offseason and bring in 1 or 2 receivers, like, fine, sure, whatever. But, does Kansas realistically want to every offseason have to bring in 4 transfer receivers? Or I guess, right, Henderson, Canty, Pickett, Wentz, and Doss technically makes 5. Do they really want to be in a situation next offseason or just an offseason in general where they're having to bring in 5 players for 1 position group? Again, that's part of the portal, that you're going to lose players and you have to adjust, and you do have to, like, the portal is reactive to a certain standpoint, that you're reacting to what your roster has, what positions you feel good about, where you feel like you can get good players in, where you can find that value. And so that is, part of it, that it is kind of a moving answer. You can't just definitively say this or that. That's how the portal works. But realistically, I'm sure if you ask Lance Leipold, hey, would you like to every offseason have to bring in 5 transfer portal receivers? He would probably say no. It'd be kind of nice if we had some returning talent. It'd be kind of nice if we had some more continuity. It'd be kind of nice if we only had to bring in, ideally, you never have to bring in anyone from the portal and just all your high school recruits are the best players ever. But ideally, we only have to bring in 1 or 2 receivers in the transfer portal. And the other guys we feel good about in how they're progressing, how they're developing, and then we have the guy next, kind of lined up to be that next player for us there. And that just might be Doss. And so important to get players like this who are talented players, but still have years of eligibility left. And so he kind of becomes a tweener of he can contribute right now, but he also represents a future piece, just like those 4 incoming freshmen that you're going to be having coming in for fall camp. All right, let's finish up here on Locked On Jayhawks with a little on KU and the MLB Draft. Dan Fitzgerald continue to, break records or open new doors for KU baseball. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Again, you can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day. Okay, so the MLB Draft saw 3 Jayhawks taken in the MLB Draft. In the 10th round, we saw Brady Counsell go to the Arizona Diamondbacks, kind of a utility infielder, I guess you could say. A really good fielder, had a good bat for KU this year. Then in the 16th round, Alex Breckheimer got picked by the St. Louis Cardinals. He is a pitcher. And then Derek Cerda in the 17th round goes to the Chicago White Sox. Now, I believe Breckheimer and Cerda can have another year back at KU if they want to, so it'll be interesting to see what their decisions are. The fact that they're taken later in the draft, maybe that's indicative that the teams aren't that confident that they're going to stay in the draft, or maybe they can pluck them away. But usually if you're going a little later in the draft, you might not get as big of a contract. Then again, the MLB draft is weird. You have these like slot bonuses where like a team can draft someone earlier in the draft, and then even like they draft the 50th best player in the draft with the 20th overall pick because they know that player is going to demand less of a contract so that you can use more contract later in the day. It's a weird, funky situation. So point being, we'll see what happens there, but that would be big if KU got both of them back. But here's what I find really interesting with all this. First of all, it's always cool to see, the players that lead to success at a school, at a program, go off to get drafted and go off to have success. And we need more Jayhawks in the MLB to join guys like Ryan Zebrowski, right? We need that to happen, right? It's just cool to kind of watch. So you look at it, and the 3 players drafted this year for KU add on to this is actually amazing to think about that. Last year, they had 6 players drafted off their team, right? You think of this one having, all this success in the world, but, you could argue a couple of their best players were not draft eligible. So still 6 players drafted in the year before, 3 in this one. That means these last 2 years of the Dan Fitzgerald era, KU baseball has had 9 players drafted into the MLB draft. You go back to, I guess, the pre-Dan Fitzgerald days. The last time that KU even had a player drafted was 2019. That was Ryan Zebrowski, who, again, is doing well with the Angels now in the MLB draft. But you have to go all the way back to 2019 for the last time KU had a player drafted in the MLB draft before these last 2 years, which they've had 9 total. In fact, you have to go all the way back to 2017 to collect 9 players drafted between 2017 to 2023. So KU's had as many players drafted in the MLB the last 2 seasons that they did, dating all the way back from 2023 till 2017. That is how much Dan Fitzgerald has changed this program. That is how much talent that Dan Fitzgerald has infused into this program. It is a big deal, and the beauty of this is it's going to keep coming. They're going to keep churning them out, and you could make an argument that they're going to start getting even more draft picks based on the talent they're bringing in and the talent that they're cultivating and the players that they currently have on their roster. And just a really cool reminder where Dan Fitzgerald took this program from to where it is now and the success that he is building at Hoagland Ballpark in Lawrence. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And again, don't forget to check out Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball, and make sure you subscribe right here on our YouTube page. Even if you only listen on the audio side, subscribe on our YouTube side. It doesn't hurt anything, but it certainly helps on our end of things. And we'll see you next time for another edition of Locked On Jayhawks.